Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Anthony back with another episode of Everything Connects, a show where I talk about personal growth, family leadership, and pressing societal issues. Today, I'm excited to bring you a great conversation. I was lucky enough to sit down with Judge Evelyn McLean. She's the Williamson County Precinct 3 Justice of the Peace. She presides over one of the busiest courts in Texas. And with an election coming up, I wanted to get a little bit more insight about her long and decorated history as a police officer, her passion for helping at-risk youth and the various programs that she's helped start, what she's seeing socially and culturally with the youth these days, and hopefully get some insight and some perspective onto how I as a parent and you as a parent can help put our kids in the best situations to prosper in today's challenging world. It's insightful, it's informative, it's Judge Evelyn McLean on Everything Connects. Enjoy.
Hello, my name's Evelyn McLean. I am the Williamson County Justice of the Peace for Precinct 3, and I hope that you will enjoy the conversation you're about to hear, and in the end, you're going to see why everything does connect.
Judge Evelyn McLean, your resume is incredible. You've done so much, and one of the reasons that I wanted to have you here today is to talk about what's happening socially, culturally, in juvenile justice and what you're seeing, because it looks like to me as a regular person watching from afar as if the youth are absolutely going crazy. Is that accurate, or is that a product of the media and social media? And
I wouldn't say they're going crazy, but I do think that they're a lot different than the youth, of our teenage years. Kids nowadays are on social media and in front of a phone or a tablet or what have you, way too much screen time. There's not a lot of family interaction. So I wouldn't say they're necessarily wild and crazy, but there's a lot of difference in our childhood and theirs now because of the way society has changed with technology, and the family unit is not as strong as it used to be. So,
and I'm a huge proponent of strong families. I talk about in my book, my background. I did not come from that. My father, who is now working recovery and doing great things for himself, trying to build a better life for himself, had 7 children with 5 different women. None of them were really a healthy, happy relationship or stable marriage that lasted any amount of time. I think those things are so important. You're saying you see kind of a change in that?
I see a change in, the family unit being a 2-parent family to a single-parent family. Yeah. I have a lot of juveniles that come through the court that have single-parent families, and they struggle. I see girls who try to seek attention elsewhere because they don't get it from their family, from a father figure. I see young men who don't think the family is that important. If they have a child with a girl, they're willing to walk away from that because they didn't have that strong family unit. I was a child of the 80s, and things were just different then. And my friends' parents weren't afraid to step in and parent me if they needed to. You don't do that nowadays.
Yeah.
And
more the village mentality.
Absolutely. And kids are on their own now in a lot of ways. Their parents are having to work and they're not home when they get home. And, kids are, like I said, their faces in their phone or their tablet, and they're not engaging the way they used to.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even families that are a 2-parent home, there's no longer, I shouldn't say no longer, but by and large, both parents are having to work, wherein just a few short generations ago, I feel like the father could go to work, the mother could take care of the house and the home and the family, and that dynamic worked at the time. But now we're all tugging on the rope trying to make it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I think a lot of times parents aren't really familiar with technology. So their kids are on a lot of different things that parents aren't aware of. And parents need to learn, and they need to get more involved in their kids' lives. Take the phone away at night, and the password to your kid's phone, know their friends, that kind of thing. They're tired too. Parents are tired, but they just need to get involved because that's their number one job. When you're a parent, you got to be the parent first. And I know you've got to make a living, but you also have to be the parent.
So the judge is saying your kid is wilding on TikTok and you don't have any idea what they're doing. One of the things that I talk about in my book a lot, First Generation Father, How to Build a Healthy and Happy Home When You Come from a Broken One, you just touched on, is when you don't come from a healthy and happy environment, people often tell the men or the young men, hey, do better for your own family, but they don't know how. Right. They don't have the tools. They don't have the understanding. They don't necessarily have the self-awareness. They don't see how all those things connect and play a part. It's too hard. It's too complicated. It takes too much personal growth and evolution for someone to just luck into it. Mm-hmm. Like, it takes a conscious effort.
I think that if somebody wants to live a different life, they absolutely can. But like you said, they have to put the work in. You can't sit on the couch and hope your life will be different. You're going to have to get involved and do something for yourself and not expect someone else to make your life better.
100%. High accountability.
Absolutely.
It's one of the things I'm so thankful it's one of the reasons I'm so thankful that of my military time, as I learned an incredibly high level of accountability. Absolutely. No finger pointing. It's up to you.
Sure.
So let's talk about that, because your career is incredible. You started in law enforcement, 1991. Let me see if I did my homework right. As a communications operations
communications operator.
So that's like taking calls?
Absolutely, yes.
In 1991. Mm-hmm. Talk about that.
Well, funny, back then, we had a radio, kind of like a microphone like this. We'd hit the button, dispatch the officer to the call, and take notes on paper. That experience, sitting there and, listening to the calls that came in and what the officers were out on, I was like, I can't sit still here. I want to be out there. I want to do that. And so I learned from being a communications operator that I wanted to take that next step and be a police officer.
So it probably kind of felt like your hands were tied when you're kind of involved in this crisis, but also kind of not.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't stand sitting there on hot calls and just sitting behind the radio and not really knowing what was going on out there. So
how old were you at that time? Because that seems like a really stressful and important job.
Probably 20, I guess.
The reason I ask is I'm trying to figure out what the cultural climate may have been around law enforcement at that time for a young woman in the field.
It was definitely male dominated. When I went through the academy, there weren't a lot of females in there. When I first started law enforcement, there weren't a lot of females. But as long as you get in, you do the job and, work hard, you're accepted, and they don't see you as a female. They see you as an officer in blue. And I never felt any less than my male partners.
Really? So that's here in very Republican Texas, where some people, because people are going to be watching this from all over. Sure. They may make the correlation in their mind, law enforcement, Texas, and put them in a very narrow group. But you're saying your experience was very welcoming and encouraging.
It was. And that may be the guys I worked with. But I never had I can't say I never had a bad experience. I did have one officer who made a few comments to me, and I made a few comments back that I'm not proud of, and we
stood your ground.
I did. And I had to have somebody pull me back off him.
Oh, wow.
So the story goes on to say that he was eventually let go by the department, and I moved up.
Wow. So, and look at you now.
Yeah.
Dang. So let me get this straight. You're working in operations, but then you went to the Sheriff's Academy in Travis County?
Travis County.
Okay.
So, and the reason I went to Travis County Sheriff's Academy is the chief that I was working for at Pflugerville Police Department told me he would be willing to sponsor me to go through the academy. And that was the academy that he sponsored me to go through. So I went through the Travis County Sheriff's Academy. Probably halfway through, it was really difficult to work the schedule that they wanted me to work at work, and that the Sheriff's Academy had for all the cadets. So I was trying to juggle both.
You were working as you were going through the academy?
Full time. And I
didn't know that was possible.
Yeah.
I thought it was immersive. You lived there and that was it.
No.
Almost like basic training.
No, you did not live at this academy, but it was really, really tough to work full time and go to the academy, put in the hours, and the homework. I mean, there was a lot of studying and homework you had to do. So I made the decision that I didn't want to be a dispatcher. I knew I wanted to be a police officer, quit my job. And in order to make it, I started a newspaper. It was called Target Monthly. And their Round Rock Leader, they print the Round Rock Leader newspaper. They agreed to print the paper for me. I went around to area law enforcement agencies and I got them to write articles for the newspaper. And then I sold advertisement to pay for it all. And
wait a damn minute. You started a newspaper? Am I understanding this right?
Yes.
So you had to choose between, do I keep my job in communications, or do I go full into the academy? You said, I'm going full in on the academy, but I'll supplement myself by starting an entire newspaper?
I did, because I was able
That's incredible.
to work for myself, set my own schedule. And so I did what I had to do to get myself through the academy. In addition to that, I had bought a house at age 21, and it was just a little 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, and, nothing fancy at all. Had a roommate. She was renting 1 bedroom already. Was she about anything? Because you're going to the academy, you're working full time, you're quitting that job, starting a newspaper. I imagine a roommate about your age is like hanging out and smoking joints. And little did she know, she had a future judge in front of her. That's funny. She was a good roommate, and I decided I was going to rent my other bedroom and bathroom out so that I could pay my mortgage and my car payment. And
it's a lot of responsibility for a person that age. You're very responsible. I mean, it makes sense now, but looking back at such a young age, that's a ton of responsibility.
Oh, thank you. I just knew what I wanted, and my belief was I was an adult and I wasn't going to take from another adult, and I didn't want my parents paying for me. I was going to find a way to do it myself. So
there are a lot of parents who just heard you say that and fantasized about their children having that mentality.
Well, I tell kids that in court today. I mean, I'm like, some of them are 17, some are even 18. And I'm like, you're about to be, or you are adult age. Your parents don't have to keep allowing you to live there. If you're going to stay living at your parents' home, I'm not saying that's wrong, but contribute. Just don't be dead weight. Don't lay on the couch all day or play games. Contribute in some way.
That ain't happening here. Yeah. My kids are young. I have 2 kids, a 14-year-old freshman at Eastview High School and a 7th grade 12-year-old daughter. We all want what's best for our kids. You never know. As they get older, they make their own decisions more and more. You hope that you raise them in the right way. But
yes.
You start this newspaper. You're working with other law enforcement entities to get stories.
I did. I would go around to area law enforcement agencies and get them to write articles. The Round Rock Leader, like I said, they printed the paper for me. And then I would go around every month. It was called Target Monthly. I would go around every month and deliver those papers to area law enforcement agencies.
This is incredible. What were the articles about?
Oh, anything could be.
Like trends in law enforcement or community safety stuff?
Yes, about the canine unit or, just anything law enforcement related.
Yeah. Reminding people it's holiday season and hide your packages in the trunk and stuff?
So the newspaper was geared toward law enforcement, but it was just officers at Round Rock PD seeing what Georgetown was doing or what Leander was doing or just kind of bringing area law enforcement together, because back then social media, the internet wasn't a big thing.
Yeah,
so
didn't exist.
Yeah,
not like this.
People still read newspapers.
I feel like, forgive my ignorance, I feel like that would consume more of your time than the full-time job that you left.
I was able to do it on my time, so I could make I could spend a day making a bunch of calls, asking people, hey, would you like to write an article for this? It was doable for me.
Wow. So it allowed you to pursue the academy. Mm-hmm. You make it through. Were there ever any moments where you thought you may not make it through? Or were you pretty confident?
I just was determined to make it through the academy. I mean, that's what I wanted. And I knew I would have to put the work into it, but I wasn't going to allow myself to fail. And Taylor PD was the first full-time job that I had. And I'll tell you what, that was such an eye-opener because that city at that time was very high crime. The calls were felony to felony to felony. Misdemeanor calls would often hold for a day or two. I was riding with my field training officer, and he said literally I was 1 week in, he said, a couple more of these calls and you'll be on your own. And it was that fast-paced. But
so you probably saw a lot in your time there.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty quick.
Yes. Every night you were guaranteed a felony something call, whether it be a felony pursuit, a man with a gun, officer needs assistance, whatever. It was, every night it was something.
Do you come from a family of law enforcement?
I do not.
It seems odd to me that you were so dedicated at such a young age, not coming from a...
You want me to tell you how I got into law enforcement?
I do.
Okay. So, I'm going to start at 15. So if you got a little time. At 15, I was, of course, in high school. I was working part-time at a card and gift shop in what's now La Frontera in Round Rock. And it used to be a little outlet mall there. So I was working at this card and gift shop on the weekends and after school. I saw so many stores kind of come and go. That mall struggled. I thought, what can I do to help the mall? I didn't know anyone in mall management, but I knew the janitor. He was always around on the weekends and at night. I said, hey, if I were to do a fashion show here at the mall, would you set up the stage and the sound equipment for me? And he said, oh, sure, I'll do that. So I went around to every store and I talked to the owner or the manager, and I asked them if they would like to put some kind of merchandise in a fashion show, whether it be an outfit, a hat, shoes, handbag. I even had a lady that sold plants in the mall, and she decorated the front of the stage with plants. I got models actually through the Round Rock Leader. We did a little seeking models, little notice in the newspaper.
You're doing this at 15 years old?
Yes. And
Adrian, get off the damn video game. She did something. She put together a whole talent show at 15.
That's funny. Well, I'm sorry. I have to say that I started working at that gift shop at 15. It was 18. I had just graduated from high school, so I'd been working there 3 years.
This makes a little bit more. Okay, Adrian, you're good, buddy.
So, yes, I had just graduated high school when I was doing this.
Because this is a ton of organizational skills and trust for other people to trust you with all that. 18 makes a little, it's still incredibly ambitious.
Yeah. So I go to work that Monday, and the store manager said that the mall manager wanted to see me. I had never met the man. I didn't even know where the mall office was. I go down there, and he offered me a job. Well, first of all, he said, I heard you had a fashion show. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, I want to offer you a job as our advertising manager.
Look at the hustle. Yeah, look at the hustle.
And he wasn't going to pay me much, but I didn't care. I was so excited. I took the job. I did that for a couple of years, and then I was promoted to assistant mall manager. So one of my job duties was to hire off-duty police officers to work security at night and on the weekends. And there was a Round Rock officer who would ask often. He kept saying, why don't you come ride? Why don't you come ride? And I was like, I didn't want to. I had
like creepy vibes or?
No, not at all. Okay. He not at all. He,
okay. I had to ask.
No, and I get that. He meant well. I just was young. I think I was about 20, because I had already been the advertising manager for 2 years. I had blown him off for months. So I go ride with him, and it was probably the most boring ride ever. Literally, we rode around.
Not the best recruiting tool.
Not at all. I was like, oh, this job's terrible. And we rode around. So we were heading back to the police department when an off-duty officer got on his phone or on his radio, and he said that he had somebody beating on his front door. Then the off-duty officer got on his handheld radio and he just yelled, "He's got a gun." The officer I was riding with flipped on his lights and sirens. Now, for the first time, we're running code 3, and my heart starts beating a little quicker. And
I don't know what code 3 is,
so
but it sounds
lights
dangerous.
and sirens are going, and I was like, "Oh, okay, we're driving fast." Yeah, the adrenaline did kick in. And we pull up to the off-duty officer's house. My side of the car is facing his house, and I see him rolling around in the front yard fighting this man for a gun. And the officer I'm riding with is yelling at me, "Get on the floorboard." And then he said, "Just take the car and get out of here." Okay. I jump in the driver's seat. The lights and sirens were still going.
You're GTA like through the neighborhood with this thing.
I was at 1:00 in the morning. And yeah. And so I knew right then I was like, I got to do this job.
Yeah, it's tough to go back to the mall after that.
Oh, yeah. And had I left 5 minutes earlier, I would not have been a police officer. But I try to tell kids, if I ever get to share that story with them, that the things you do, no matter what they are, they put you on a path, whether good or bad. I wasn't trying to do a fashion show to better myself. I was trying to help them all, but it ended up benefiting me. And, I try to tell kids, get involved, do things, do for others. When you give to others, it'll give, you'll receive as well. So
100%. I've had so many experiences like that in my life. And to piggyback on that point, oftentimes the way that you're paid back or the benefit that you receive, you never know what it is and you can't anticipate what it is.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like you've paid into this, whatever you want to call it, karmic good, and it opens up a pathway for you that you may not even have been able to imagine.
Very much so.
And so here you are all these years later. So talk to me about the year that you won Police Officer of the Year.
So
that's incredible. First of all, respect. That's unbelievable.
Well, thank you. I don't know. I think back then, if I look back, and it's been a lot of years, but looking back, I think it was because I had a lot of involvement with our youth. You
were in Georgetown at the time?
I was. Okay. And even now as a judge, I really have a passion for the kiddos. I don't want them to go to a higher court. If I can do anything in my court to keep a kid from ever going to higher court, I want to. And I've always had a passion for kids. I worked with their DARE program and a program called GREAT, which was a gang resistance and education and training program. Anything that involved kids, I was signing up for or helping with. So I think that's what helped me get Officer of the Year.
Wow. Incredible. So a lot of people who are watching won't be familiar at all with the court system, like you said, to a higher court. Talk a little bit about the court systems and what that means for a juvenile offender or a juvenile, someone in the juvenile system.
So I'm a judge at a Justice of the Peace Court. My court is one of the busiest courts in the entire state of Texas. It's where people would start, if you will. It's mainly Class C misdemeanors. I also have a lot of civil type cases. I hear evictions, debt claims, small claims up to $20,000.
So not just kids, but obviously adults in these situations.
Yes. I have adults and juveniles. So I handle the Class C misdemeanors, which are the lowest criminal cases. Juvenile cases, I help kids that are get filed on for truancy. I try to keep them in school, try to find something that will help them to not get lost. And one of the things we do, we have a mentor program. Mm-hmm. We also have a teen court program, and we have what every teen should know about Texas law. And all of those are just geared toward educating the kids, being involved with them, helping them to get on the right path and to head in a positive direction.
So when you see kids, oftentimes they're on a path and you know that if it doesn't change, you know where it's headed. Higher courts, more trouble.
I just try to find whatever way I can to reach them, to get through to them, to hopefully make a difference. There's a young man in Georgetown who I teamed up with because I know I can't reach all of the juveniles. He grew up in Georgetown. He got involved in drugs. He was a drug dealer, but he has completely changed his life around, and he has a heart for kids. So I called him and I said, hey, come to my court. I'd like to talk to you. And so he and I put together a program called Straight Talk, which was more of an event than a program. He had a lot of his friends that had been to prison that came and talked to kids and told them about, the poor decisions they made, what it resulted in. And I can tell you there was one kid, I won't say his name, but that was a breaking point for him. He had been in my court several times, and he went to that event and he was in tears. His dad came to that event with him, and they didn't have a good relationship. His mom had walked out on him. So it was a single parent family, but it was just the dad and him.
That's tough.
And it was a beautiful moment though, because that kid broke down. He was crying. I had never seen them really have much of a relationship, but after that they hugged each other. And so I don't know, I just try to find ways to help wherever I can.
You're doing incredible things, and I appreciate you so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
As a person who was in the juvenile justice system myself, I can't tell you how important what you're doing is. And also, I would say, just because you don't see that type of reaction from someone doesn't mean that you're not planting the seed that may sprout later where it hits them and they go, hey, I need to change my freaking life. I need to take accountability. I need to better myself based on the seed that you guys planted. So I can't give you guys enough props for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
So how did you go from law enforcement to what you do now? Where does one make that transition? I was looking at your promotion progression, and it was sergeant, and then it was lieutenant, and then it was captain. Is that right?
Yes.
Just remarkable. So how do you then go after all that time in law enforcement to what you're doing now?
Well, never ever was this on my radar. I have been a realtor for the past 20 years in addition to law enforcement.
I love how you just drop things like it's another thing. Like I started a newspaper and while I was in the academy, and then I've been a realtor for 20 years on top of being law enforcement and winning officer of the year and starting these programs for juveniles. It's like, golly, I need to step my game up, man.
So I was going to pursue real estate, and my husband and I were going to move to Lake Buchanan in Burnett. And, we had a little RV park and store out there. We were going to run that. So real estate, we had a plan. And 1 week before the campaign filing deadline, I was having coffee with my crime scene specialist, and she said to me, why don't you run for justice of the peace? I had never thought of that. That was on a Monday. The filing deadline to run for office was the following Monday. I wasn't completely sure if that's what I wanted to do. And Wednesday night, we went to our church small group. Our pastor said, hey, it looks like you got something on your mind. And I said, yeah, I'm trying to decide if I should run for justice of the peace. And typical pastor answer, he said, just pray about it. Yes.
Yeah,
and I was like, okay. Well, Thursday I thought, you know what? I haven't done that. So I was getting ready for work. My husband was already gone and I was kind of running late, but I thought, oh, I better pray about this. And it was a rather quick prayer, but I was basically like, hey, I just need direction. I need a sign. Is this what you want me to do? And I go to work. My assistant chief said, I need you to go to a chief's meeting with me at lunch. And I said, well, I have plans. And he said, I need you to break them. So I said, okay. So I go to the chief's meeting with him. And on the way, he knew that I was thinking about running. So on the way to this meeting, he said, hey, don't talk about you running at this meeting. I said, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. So we get through the meeting. It was packed. And then at the end, everybody leaves, and he and I are the last two in the room. We're about to walk out when the constable walks back in, and he said, hey, I got to my truck. I wanted to come back in and find out about chief neuro who had recently had surgery. And so we were just talking a few minutes, and I look over at my assistant chief. He looks at me, he goes, "Go ahead." And so I asked the constable, I said, "Hey, what would you think if I told you I was thinking about running for JP?" He gave me a great big bear hug, and he said, "Would you please?" And he said, "My wife and I have been racking our brains trying to think of somebody." And he said, "Evelyn, this is a sign." And I thought, "Oh, okay."
You asked for it.
Yes.
Here it
and
is.
Not once, but twice he told me this is a sign. But I just wasn't sure. It wasn't my plan. But it just kept eating at me. So Sunday morning after church, a district judge said to me, "Hey, did you file to run yet?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Go do it today." And I said, "On a Sunday, can you even do that?" And he said, "Yes, here's the name and the number." I went and did it, and the next day was the deadline. So I literally went to the day before the filing deadline.
Filed the very last minute and won.
I did.
So this is an elected position. You've never been in an elected position before that.
Knew nothing about politics.
What's that whole process like? Is it now political at that point?
It is a political position. I knew nothing about running a campaign. I knew
It's a whole other world.
Oh, it was. And
Your resume is incredible, but now you got to play that game.
yeah. Which I'll be honest with you, I am not a politician. I'm really not. I'm just somebody that truly cares and wants to make a difference. And I just happen to be in a position that you have to be elected to.
Does that cost money?
Yes, it cost surprisingly quite a bit of money maybe it was good. I didn't realize what I was getting myself into because I don't know that I would have done it. But
how do you get money?
You have
Door
to
to
ask,
door?
and that's the worst thing about it. Who wants to ask somebody to give them money? But yeah, you ask people if they'll support you, and then you have to go to a lot of clubs and meetings and do speeches and
All that stuff.
Yeah,
Schmooze.
yeah.
Plus, you probably have to walk such a fine line. This was before social media was so big, but nowadays with social media, you know how it is. You sit back, you have a glass or two of wine, you're going through Facebook and you see something kind of controversial and you throw out a flippant comment.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know,
Yeah.
man, that sinks so many people. But it's funny, when you don't have anything to lose, you can go online and say all sorts of crazy stuff and no one cares. But you're in such a hot light, elected a position
Right.
here in conservative Texas. You gotta be incredibly careful probably how you tread.
Yes and no. So I wasn't seeking this position to begin with. I already had a plan, and I feel like I'm exactly where God wants me. And if he didn't want me here, I wouldn't be here. I want to be respectful of others. I don't throw out wild comments.
You can just be your genuine self and it won't get you in trouble.
Yeah.
See, I had to rein myself in quite a bit just because sometimes you're trying to be funny and you're like, oh, this will be flippant. This will if people know you, they understand your intent.
Sure.
But when they just see words on a screen, it can be totally different.
Absolutely. It was a little stressful because I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, every step of the way was new for me. And I just had to learn as I went.
Was there a presidential election that year?
There was not. But the first one was in 2018 is when I ran. I run when the governor runs. Yeah. So I'm the off year.
So
2 years
into
Trump.
So you're 2 years into Trump.
Yes.
And you're running. Do you have to run with a political, forgive me, do you have to run with the political association, like a party association?
You do not have to, although the precinct that I'm in is primarily Republican. Mm-hmm. And so I run under the Republican ticket. You don't have to, you could run as an independent, but you're probably not going to get too far. I have zero to do with national politics in my position. So I don't really feel like it had much bearing.
Yeah, what most people don't realize is that honestly, voting at the local level is significantly more important in most
than the presidential race.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you're more likely to come before me than you'd have anything to do with the president or Congress, or, so
the people at the local level are the ones who are actually kind of driving what's happening in the neighborhood.
Absolutely. Like the school board races, those are so important. I'll say too, somebody doesn't have to be ordered to my court for me to help them. If somebody out there listening wants help for their child, wants help for themselves, call us. We have a lot of resources. We'll try to find something for that person. One of the other things that I do is have to conduct death inquests to determine cause and manner of death when somebody dies unattended by a physician. And then I sign the death certificate, and I get a lot of suicides. And that's something that doesn't have to happen. And if people are struggling that much and they don't know who to call, well, first of all, I'd say if you don't know who to call 911, because they're always going to answer the phone. If you just want to call our office and say, hey, what resources are out there, we'll find something for somebody.
The numbers are out there. I know just for military veterans, there are over 20 veterans a day that commit suicide.
Yeah.
So I could imagine the number if you include everyone. And unfortunately, teens are part of that as they're going through so much. And
my youngest that I've had is 10 years old. I just can't even imagine.
So you've talked about your faith a lot. I appreciate that. Did you rely on your faith as you did your daily duties as a police officer?
Probably not as much as I do now. So next month I'll be married 29 years, but at about year 20, my husband and I had some problems.
Year 20? Well, we had problems like 6 months in.
Well, we probably did, but we were both so career minded and doing our own thing to move up in our careers. And so we probably did have problems that we just weren't recognizing. So at year 20, they really manifest themselves. And so I now have such a heart for marriages, for families. And I would say that was probably the turning point for me. I mean, I believed in God, absolutely. And I just wasn't pursuing him the way I do now. So that was my turning point.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I'm going to let my cat out of the
Sure.
bedroom because she's banging on the door.
I've done 2 mental health and wellness expos, and I did it because so many people would come to me and say, hey, what resources do you have for my family member or for myself? And I didn't even know the answers. I didn't know what all we had in our community to help people that were struggling. So we put together a mental health and wellness expo, and literally 5 minutes before it started, people were standing outside. The room was packed the whole 2 hours. And I just right then knew there's such a need for that. And, I tell people, especially when I talk to people about their marriage, you don't go and buy a new car and never change the oil or never put new tires on your car. I mean, you have to maintain it.
Exactly.
Well, it's the same thing with your own health or your own marriage. You've got to do things and not wait until they get bad.
100%.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more.
And if somebody wants to ever talk, call us, and it can have nothing to do with the JP office. If they just make a phone call and just say, hey, any ideas on what we can do? I heard you talking. Can you just help me here? Help my daughter, my son, whatever. Make that call. We'll help.
You're awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you.
You nailed it.
Thank you.
Boom. So there it was. What a great job, Judge Evelyn McLean. Thank you so much for stopping by. And thank you all for listening. If you're new to this channel, go ahead and subscribe. It helps me get my work out to more people, and it helps you know when I've added more valuable content online for you to enjoy. See you next time. And until then, remember, everything connects. Peace.